Hello, my name is Cal Wojcicki, and I'd like to welcome you to this lesson, which is just one lesson, of course, in a complete series of lessons on how to do the rhythm two-step, which is also called the Arizona two-step. In this lesson, Shelly and I are going to teach a very simple move called the crank. I may have mentioned this in the first series we did, but the crank is a move that I actually learned for the progressive two-step, and one day I just thought we could do this in the Arizona two-step. So I started to do it. There may be some other people that do it, but I've never really seen it taught before. But it's very simple, so Shelly and I are going to do this. It's not real advanced. I think you'll have fun with this. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and show the crank first. We're starting in closed position, but somehow we're going to want to get in the cross hand position. And it just goes like this. I normally do about 3, just like this. Now when you're doing that, again, it's basically a variation of a lady's outside turn. In my opinion, you could do it just once, but I don't think once looks like much. If you do one of them, in my opinion, that doesn't look a whole lot different than just a lady's outside turn. I think what makes it look kind of cool is when you do 2, 3, or 4, then it becomes a little more obvious. I'm under the impression that this is a move that as more people are starting to do this move, some gentlemen are a little bit rough when they're doing it. So even though it's called the crank, it's not, the crank is kind of a harsh word in a way. You know, you normally think of cranking something like my car when I want to start. You know, I crank it. But it shouldn't be a rough or an aggressive lead. Actually, when I do it, I often am using like 1 or 2 fingers. I actually put them in between the lady's hand and just let them pivot this way. So you want to be just forceful enough to let her know what she's doing, because this is a move, it's a leadable move. You don't have to do it with somebody that's done a lesson or knows what you're going to do. But be a little bit gentle and be aware that you always want to watch that. Some women hurt their shoulders and their arms by gentlemen being too rough. So don't be too rough. Be firm and direct with what you're doing, and if she's not getting it, then maybe back off. Don't try to force her into it. But as a rule, I don't ever have a problem leading a lady into the crank, and I don't think I've ever hurt anybody's arm, but I'm very conscientious and aware of maybe what it's feeling like, hopefully, for the lady. So again, I typically do about 3, because I think it looks oversimplified if you only do 1. You could do 5, but we've talked about this before too. Always make sure there's room around you when you're doing it, so you're not running into people.
And the lady doesn't get dizzy.
Yeah, and don't do it more than what you have reason to believe the lady can and wants to do. And as we've talked about before, anytime you're anytime you're turning a lady several times in one direction, most women will tend to agree that they kind of like being turned the other direction at least once or twice, kind of to unwind them in a sense. So there's not a whole lot to break down here, other than you're going to want to get in either this cross hand position or this position here. And there's a lot of ways you can do it. What we did a moment ago, because we happen to be starting in this position, I just simply took her hand like this. And then I dropped my left hand and her left hand, and then I let her. And you're going to lead her by, when you're on the 5-6, you're going to bring your arm back, just like you do when you're doing ladies outside turn up here. You're just going to bring the arm this way a little bit, and then I'm going to try not to turn you 50 times. And then you're basically just going to start going up with the arm and down. I think it looks a little bit cooler, especially in progressive. If you see somebody doing this move and they're competing, for instance, they're going to try to have that up and down, almost like a wagon wheel. I've also heard people call this a wagon wheel. But up and down. But of course, if the lady's not real tall, you don't want to be yanking on her arm. But I think it looks a little bit better, more up and down, rather than this. This would be the opposite of that. That's not going to look so much like the crank. So I think more up, more down, like big circles, but don't be forcing the lady. So kind of one more time. I mean, if you want, I don't know if it makes sense to follow along, But we'll just go ahead and start, well, we'll start here in the closed position. So we'll start in the closed position. I'm going to do a basic and switch hands. I'm going to bring her arm down and then crank, crank, crank. And then normally after I've done 3, because that's how I normally do it, I normally kind of slow the arm down just to kind of let her know she's not going to keep turning, rather than crank, 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 and then abruptly stopping. So for me, it's more of a crank, crank, slow down. And then the way that I like to come out of it, I don't know why I found that this works well. When I get done with the last one, I've slowed down, I like to bring her this way on a 5-6, just like this, and then I normally grab the other hand and then just somehow bring her out this way. So I'll go ahead and show that. So we're gonna start over again in the closed position. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna start in the closed position. I'm gonna switch hands. We're gonna do around, around, around. Slow down, then bring her into a 5-6, and then anything you want to do from here. It could be a double turn with a kind of a free spin there. There's a lot of things you can do. And by the way, this is one of those turns. Later on, we're going to have a turn called Around the World. And specifically, Around the World is a move where the lady does a bunch of inside turns, and the whole idea is to have her going around you. That's why it's called Around the World. It wouldn't look as good if you were just kind of wandering all over the floor. Well, this one, the crank, also is, well, actually there's 2 ways you can do it. You can actually specifically crank or do this in a line like this, turn, 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 like that, and then I still like to come back, but that's just a personal preference, and then I come out something like that. Or go around. More often than not, I probably tend to do it in a circle. Let's just, so we're kind of mixing up the angle we're facing. Even though I'm kind of turning, we're just going to start in this position. So again, I'm going to do a basic, I'm going to switch the hands, I'm going to kind of let her know, I'm going to do a crank, 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 slow down, bring the arm back on a 5-6, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4. An alternate, if you don't like that little twist, and again, I may not have mentioned this a minute ago, here, move over this way a little, Shelly. Again, this is the 3rd crank. When we do that 3rd crank, I slow down, and then when I bring her this way, I kind of bring her, and again, gently, never forcing. I don't just bring her arm, but I kind of give it a slight twist, and she'll tend to just turn like that. And then I grab the hand here. So if you're going to do it, you're doing that 5-6, 5-6 with a gentle twist to the hand, and bringing it down. But here's another alternative way that you can come out of it. That's very simple. And this, again, we're going to do the 3rd or the last crank, however many you're doing. So we're going to imagine we already did a couple. We're going to do a crank, and you can simply just come like this into this cross hand position. And then whenever you're ready, you could just do a ladies free spin or a dual free spin where you both turn or something like that. So you don't have to do that one where she does a outside turn and comes next to you. If you want to follow along, we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go ahead and just count it. Ready, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, well that is a move that I call the crank, or you can also call it the wagon wheel. We sure appreciate your watching, and we'll see you in the next lesson.